It's our pleasure now. Head out to the Jim's Firearms Hotline. That's where we find Faxon Childress, host of Faxon Sports, 1055 The Roar, the flagship of Clemson Athletics out in South Carolina. Faxon, thanks for the time. How are you?
I'm doing well. Super excited for August 30th and also super excited to chat some ball today. Let's get right to it.
Let's do it. First of all, big picture. Let's talk Clemson vibes. It was obviously a ridiculous run for Dabo with Deshaun Watson and with Trevor Lawrence where it was them in Alabama. That was pretty much the top of college football. Then a bit of a dip there, and a playoff run last year. What's the environment and the energy like around Clemson football right now?
Yeah, I think this is the most excitement that's been in the building and been cultivated around the program since Trevor Lawrence's departure. And, obviously it would be ignorant to ignore that there was a dip for 3 or 4 years, and there was a decline in quarterback play. Offensive line and wide receiver play were not adequate, and you throw some pretty brutal injury luck into the mix, and you have a couple 9-10 win seasons in comparison to the 12, 13, 14 that Tigers fans have been accustomed to. But I think when you look at the returning production for this specific Clemson team, when you look at the schedule and scheduling challenging opponents like LSU, playing South Carolina, and then the expanded playoff as well with the chance for an automatic bid, a lot of Clemson fans are viewing this as their best chance to win a national championship since Trevor Lawrence's departure, and I agree with that analysis.
Let's talk about last year. Playoff appearance, which is great. Had a berth in the ACC title game, won it, that's great. But also lost some home games, which doesn't happen very much around those parts. So what was the thought on last year as a whole?
Yeah, it was a really interesting season. You obviously start out by, let's face it, laying an egg against Georgia, right? Yeah. You only put up 3 points, and you were really competitive in the first half, and it got away from you in the second half. Then you lose kind of an inexplicable game to Louisville right in the middle of your calendar when it felt like things were going great, right? Cade Klubnik goes for 7 total touchdowns in the first half against App State. You blow out NC State, and then Louisville is when it came to a screeching halt. And then Clemson really just collapsed towards the tail end of the South Carolina game. I had every opportunity to slam the door shut on the Gamecocks and couldn't get it done. But Fran Brown was able to beat Miami, get Clemson into the ACC championship game, and then Clemson actually played what I view as a really competitive game in Austin, Texas. 7-point game in the fourth quarter and just did not have enough run defense to get it done. But when I look at the main issue for Clemson last year, it was run defense. They got ran all over by everybody throughout the course of the season, and it was a large part of why a defensive coordinator change was made in this previous offseason to go from Wes Goodwin to Tom Allen from Penn State, who's making the trip down from Happy Valley. So when I look at last year, it's hard to call it a failure of a season, even for Clemson standards, because you win a championship and you go to the college football playoff. But I think it was getting back to that stage for the first time in a couple of years has left a lot of Tigers fans very, very hungry for more. And I think that's building the anticipation to this season where myself and many others view Clemson as a legitimate national championship contender.
Part of Dabo's, secret sauce there for so long was coordinator continuity. Just phenomenal job keeping Brent Venables around. Offense was generally piloted by the same 2 guys for a long time. You had, obviously, a shakeup there at defensive coordinator last year. What is Tom Allen bringing in from Happy Valley?
Man, I think it's night and day. Leadership, energy, intensity, and, Wes Goodwin had a really good understanding of the X's and O's, in my opinion, but I'm also a firm believer that your unit takes the demeanor that your leader takes. And Wes Goodwin was a very laid-back guy with his demeanor. Tom Allen's in your face. He's tackling people in practice. He's always screaming, it feels like, based off of what we've seen. And he is one of the most intense human beings I've ever been around. So his attention to detail, his priority on tackling, gap alignment, and the fundamentals, which were 3 massive issues for Clemson last year, I think has Clemson in a very, very good spot on that side of the football in comparison to where they were a year ago today.
Can you kind of give us the elevator pitch on Cade Klubnik's career arc at Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you look back 2 years ago when he became a first-year starter, he was bright-eyed, and it was like a puppy dog. That's what we called him around here in these parts. It was golden retriever Cade, and it felt like the game was moving too fast for him. But I was always a firm believer and kind of dug my heels in a little bit, to be candid, Hunt, that it was more of a product of the offensive line and wide receiver play than who was playing quarterback. We had seen DJ struggle. We had seen Cade struggle. And when Matt Luke got hired is when Cade Klubnik's career changed, because Clemson's offensive line and pass pro became vastly better. Tyler Grisham hit on the recruiting trail with 2 freshman dogs that are now coming into their sophomore season, and Bryant Wesco Jr. And TJ Moore. And then Cade stopped trying to play hero ball. Was a big part of it as well, was he felt so much pressure with an inadequate supporting cast around him in his first year as a starter that he was forcing the issue. He was going against the grain. He was trying to make plays by himself. Last year, he had an adequate supporting cast for the first time in his career. He let the game come to him, and you saw the talent showcase that we all know was there with his recruiting pedigree. So I think Cade's shaping up to have the best season of his career. He's entering year 3 with coordinator continuity, which you referenced as a very important thing with Garrett Riley. And that's another thing that people kind of neglected with his first year as a starter is went from Brandon Streeter to Garrett Riley. He was having to adjust to a new scheme for the first time with a new position coach as well. His first year as a starter with an injury-riddled O-line and wide receiver that was just not – they weren't very good, and they weren't good enough for Clemson standards, to be candid. So I think that if you're looking for Cade Klubnik stock to buy, I would buy all you can, and I think him and Nussmeier, man. I know you guys are in Baton Rouge. Those are the two best in the country, in my opinion. You can slice it 1A, 1B, however you want, but those two guys are going in the top 15 in the NFL draft if I had to predict right now.
Faxon Childress is our guest. Hosts of Faxon Sports, 1055 The Roar, the flagship of Clemson Athletics. Let's talk about wide receiver. Is this as good a wide receiver core as Clemson has had in some time?
This is the best wide receiver core Clemson's had in 7 years. And I think the main discernible difference as well is the depth of the wide receiver room. There have been a couple years where Clemson's had some upper echelon guys, but we referenced those injuries. When they went down, that depth was really lacking. Now, when you look on the outside, you got TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco Jr., as we alluded to in the previous little riff. Those guys are dogs, man. Those guys are absolute dogs. Antonio Williams is in the slot, who's a 1,000-yard All-American type of receiver. Tyler Brown was a freshman All-American 2 years ago in Cade's first season as a starter. He missed all of last year, almost injured, but he's back. And then you got Tristan Smith, who's a 6'5", big-body guy, coming from the D2 level, and he's making the step up this year out of the transfer portal for Dabo. And then you throw in a guy like Cole Turner, who's carved out a little bit of a niche as your burner. He'll come off some jet sweeps. He wants to get horizontal and utilize that speed. I think Clemson's got a really good and deep wide receiver room. And when you look at Moore, Wesco, and Williams specifically, I think those are the 3 best wide receivers in the entire ACC. And if they're not the 3 best, they're 3 of the best 5. Those guys are really, really special, and Clemson is looking very, very promising this year on the offensive side.
Do they have a running back?
See, this is the big problem right here. So we don't know. I'm glad you asked about this, Hunt. So the primary, and being in practice and being in camp the last couple of weeks and stuff, the primary ball carrier right now is Adam Randall, who is a converted wide receiver. But you've got a couple guys that are uber talented, kind of lurking in the shadows as well as depth pieces. Gideon Davidson's a 4-star true freshman running back that looks like he's 23 years old right now and not 18, very physically imposing. David Eziamume is another guy, redshirt freshman from Norcross. He's a very violent runner. So when you combine Randall, Davidson, and Eziamume, I would anticipate in that game on August 30th, Randall's probably going to be your first guy out there, but you're going to see all 3 get carries. And in comparison to the last couple of years for Clemson, where it's been a ton of Shipley, a ton of Maffa, you're going to have more of a split workload this year in comparison to years past. But I think that's the biggest concern on the entire roster right now is who's playing running back for Clemson.
On the defensive side, you mentioned poor run defense last year. What have they done to shore that up?
I think it's schematic, and I think it's just Tom Allen. I think the personnel is there. You look at Peter Woods and T.J. Parker, 98% of the NFL mock draft guys have both of those guys in their top 10. If you value those things, you can take that for what it's worth. I think they're both uber talented players. Something that's a little weird, Hunt, is last year Peter Woods actually played edge. Even though he's a DT, Clemson was so thin at that position that he had to kick out and play edge, and he was still able to dominate football games. But Clemson just was not good enough at linebacker last year when it comes to that discipline and staying in the gaps. And the run fits were also just straight up atrocious at times last year. So you lose Barrett Carter, you lose a couple depth pieces on your D-line, but you still bring back the majority of your premier players in your front 7. And I think that's the biggest hope right now, is the word I would use, to be candid, is you're hoping that Tom Allen can help shore up a lot of those fundamental issues you had last year, because I think every Clemson fan and every media member here in the market would tell you talent's not the issue on that side of the ball. Last year it was coaching.
One more here, Faxon. Appreciate a little bit of time here on this Monday. Obviously, LSU has spoken outwardly about the importance of this game. I don't know if I would categorize it as smack talk, but they've certainly said we know how important it is. Anything, is that registering in the Clemson side, and are they saying anything to that effect?
To be honest, it's pretty quiet around Tigertown in South Carolina here, Hunt. But I don't think that Clemson has necessarily taken it as disrespect. Personally, from my perspective, I've got a ton of respect for Brian Kelly and that program in Baton Rouge. And I know Dabo Swinney shares that same sentiment. He's spoken very highly of Brian Kelly every time he's been given the chance. And I think the players are just excited, right? These are two programs that are recent national champions in 2018 and 2019, respectively, that have failed to get back to that stage. And this is a year where both respective fan bases feel like they've got a really good roster. And I think that these are two of the best 10 teams in the country, and that majority of fans from each side would also agree with that sentiment. So I would say it's more just excitement and anticipation than smack talk. I do know that a couple videos have made their rounds on social media these last couple of weeks. And, I love it, to be honest, because that's what this is about. It's about building that hype and the anticipation. And this is what a Clemson LSU game should have as the precursor, is this hype building up to the event. So I wouldn't say the Clemson guys have necessarily taken it as disrespect or chirping their mouth back in response. I think everybody here is just really excited to play the football game and play on a big stage that everybody's going to be watching with two of the best programs in college football.
We'll get there eventually. August can be a long month, but one way or another, it'll roll around. Faxon, we appreciate a little bit of time here on this Monday. We'll do it again.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, man.
Faxon Childress from the Roar, 1055 there in South Carolina, talking a little bit of ball. It's not a secret. It's not a surprise. These are two programs that are really hyped up for this season, and one of them is going to emerge that Saturday night feeling like they've got a real shot to win a national championship, and one of them is going to wake up on Sunday morning and go, uh-oh. It's just the way it is, and that's when you put these games on the schedule. That's the way it goes. Now, it's not quite as big an uh-oh as it has been in a 4-team playoff era, but it's still a big deal. So we'll see. It should be a classic there in Clemson, and we'll continue to talk about it as the month of August rolls along. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.